And today he is here to talk with us about something I've been sharing a lot with you all in terms of the how I came to have the sorts of analysis that I have and how it is that I have been able to do the work that I have done for a really long period of time. And that is something that we like to call Sankofa circles. I've talked with you all about this in the past with the organization that I have been working with alongside with Brian called Sankofa Community Empowerment. And the reality is that those sorts of conversations that we have in that space are extraordinarily important for Black people. It's a very therapeutic environment. And in light of everything that we're grappling with right now, I had asked Brian if he would come on to talk with us about this because I think that we need to expand the work of the Sankofa circles. A number of you have participated in them. A small fraction of you have participated in them before. We used to have these every week when we were much younger than we in person, and it was this amazing experience. And we had since pivoted to virtual spaces as well. But I wanted Brian to come on to talk with us about this because I believe that Sankofa circles provide for the type of therapeutic learning and healing that, frankly, we really, really need. And one thing I've always said was, in light of the fact that we recognize that Black people coming out of enslavement did not have access to therapy, we envision Sankofa circles as the sort of therapy that Black people need to navigate those sorts of racial trauma. So, Brian, welcome back to the show. It is a pleasure to have you here.
It is great to be here, Lurie. It's been a while.
It's been a while. It's been a while. Well, for you on this show anyway. For those of you who don't know, Brian's also my husband. So that's kind of the joke. That's kind of the key. But Brian, I really wanted us to have this conversation because as you and I have been having these discussions at the house about everything that we're experiencing, I have really been intent on trying to expand the work that we could do with Sankofa circles. So for people who are sort of new to this concept, could you just explain to us what a Sankofa circle is and how these came to be as a therapeutic model that you and I have been relying on for the past 20 plus years?
Absolutely. I first want to say that it is a blessing to be on the Lurie Daniel Favor Show and to interact with your audience. The Sankofa circles are essentially an affinity space, a unique affinity space for people of African descent that really allow us to come together on a regular basis to unpack critical issues that impact our community on a local, national, and even a global level. We like to say that it is a support group that allows Black folks to come together and share their stories and experiences in dealing with racism, as well as just the racial trauma that Black folks have to face on a day-to-day basis. For some people, it's an educational tool that allows them to get valuable information that they may not have received in their schooling or in their day-to-day lives, while at the same time being able to learn from one another, kind of that group therapy. For some people, it's a think tank, a place to share ideas, even debate in some instances, but in a safe space where we're going to leave connected, knowing we're still dependent on one another. For some people, it's a mobilization mechanism for those who are already kind of in the struggle to just come and see like-minded individuals, people who are trying to get involved, a mechanism that allows community members to organize one another around local or national issues and initiatives. Overall, though, very much like your show does, Lurie, your show really informs people. Your analysis is really food for thought for a lot of people that help them to get through the day, to help them to deal with what we believe, what we call our post-traumatic slave syndrome. For those of you who are familiar with Dr. Joy DeGruy work or internalized racism, just the experience of having to deal with racism, to have to live in a world that doesn't always appreciate us. A world where we're always constantly dealing with microaggressions, having to turn on the news or maybe go to work and hear people maybe praising Charlie Kirk or making comments about Black Lives Matter. But it's a tool that allows us to come together in an unapologetically Black space. And I think what's unique about Sankofa, more so than just a book club or maybe an affinity space, maybe a venting space, we have a whole therapeutic model that we use that is really designed specifically to guide our community through a journey of what we call self and collective transformation.
Mm.
So that's it in a
What
nutshell.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you broke it down that way because I often lean into the analogy and I the one that I had just shared about the ways in which people who were struggling with the addictions of alcoholism, and they were struggling with the addiction of alcoholism at a time when being an alcoholic was not considered a medical issue. There was very little understanding as to the science of addiction, and once we began to understand that addiction is a medical issue, then it allowed Americans to formulate a response to that addiction, and you had the creation of a whole host of methodologies, but the Alcoholics Anonymous space is one that was specifically designed to help people navigate the throes of addiction, recognizing that you might always struggle with the indices of addiction, but if you had a support group, if you had a therapeutic space, a place to, yes, purge, and a space to be a support for others, not only are you in a community that is designed for your specific needs in mind, but you're also, as a result of that community, strengthened in your ability to grapple with the challenges that the addiction might cause for you. And years ago, we had a series, because y'all, we used to do Sankofa circles every single week. Every single week. They started at Penn State. And Brian, if you could, I want to ask you to talk to us a little bit about the origin story as well. But we used to do Sankofa circles every single week. Now, when we got a little older and had mortgages and kids and jobs, we shifted to every month. But we would have these themes that would focus every semester, for example. And I remember that one of the themes looked at the impact, the medical impact, the biophysical and mental health impact of racism and white supremacy on our lives. And I realized in that moment that it's like we as Black people have been forcibly addicted to white supremacy, because we had been having all of these conversations about how we knew that these were value systems that did not center us, but yet we were trying to be successful in these value systems. And I was like, y'all, it feels like if white supremacy were a drug and we were forcibly addicted to it, then Sankofa circles are like our AA for Black people. And
Right.
so that analogy just sort of stuck, because we realized that it requires more than just having a space to vent. Our healing requires more than just having a space to commiserate. It really does require a therapeutic approach. And I began really honing in on this language. And you may remember, I know it made some people uncomfortable when I first started doing this. They were like, I'm not addicted to anything. I'm like, well, can you live without white supremacy impacting your life? No. Well, then, baby, we have been addicted forcibly through no fault of
Right.
our own to this reality. And so these spaces provide for us not just that venting, but it also provides an opportunity to hone our analysis. And I
Right.
say that because I know a lot of y'all listen to me every day and you'd be like, that girl got words. She can say things. I wish I could have that. Y'all, every single day on this show, I'm using the same sorts of analyses that I have been perfecting for the past 20 plus years.
25 years.
20. Dang, is we that old, baby?
24. We've been doing these since 1999.
We ain't had to tell all that, but yes, we yes, we have. And so, y'all, there's a reason I'm able to show up the way that I show up. I've got 20 plus years in the game of this sort of therapeutic experience that has allowed me this sort of access and entree. Brian, if you could tell us the origin story of how Sankofa Circles first started, because it's important to know the origin stories of things that we want to share so that people are aware as to how we got to where we are and where we began. Talk to us a little bit about what was
Absolutely.
happening
And even
at Penn State.
before I get into the origin story, just to kind of piggyback on what you said, and Dr. Joy DeGree talks a lot about this in her speeches and keynotes, as well as her book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. You know, most Black people have never been a part of a structured mechanism that would give us uh, an analysis and an understanding of the trauma that we've inherited, right? So after slavery, we didn't go get healing to deal with the colorism that white supremacy had put on top of us, to deal with all of the trauma from a holistic standpoint. So Sankofa sessions really serve as a space that is intentional about kind of giving us permission to heal. And just to think about kind of the origin story, as Lurie said, her and I met at Penn State University. And actually, I started my career there, and while she was, I believe you were in DC, working for the Department of Justice.
Oh no, I think I think I was in the Dominican Republic. I
I
was still
think
on
when we
the
actually
squad
started the Sankofa, though, you were in
back
DC. It
in
must have been the
okay.
Dominican Republic. But in a nutshell, this Sankofa, it started off as just a seminar. I worked and started my career in student affairs. Did my graduate work there. Then I started working in student affairs, and I was the advisor for the Black Caucus on campus. And really, it kind of started a student staff project with myself and my good brother Chinnis Pettigrew, who's a powerful artist out here in New York. And we wanted to bring Black people, Black student leaders together, just to kind of deal with some of the historic beefs that we had. We had the Qs beefing with the Kappas because of who broke whose cane 3 years ago. And at this time, it was like,
That was a real fight, y'all.
the real beefs. But the same issues that we have on every campus: the Philly brothers versus the New York brothers versus the Christians versus the Caribbean Student Association versus the football players, and all of these divisions were taking place. And we wanted to bring student organizations together initially, just to have a closed door, to make sure we weren't scheduling on top of each other, to make sure that we could collaborate and that we could have some just some continuity amongst on campus at Penn State where there were 40,000 students and we were only 2%, but still not on the same page. And the first meeting we had was contentious because some of the Greek organizations started arguing about who did more service and whatnot. And it was a bad meeting, but we realized after that, let's just invite the community. But we are going to make this just for Black folks. What started off with 20 people ended up being maybe 30, 40 people, and we started having conversations. Elders from the community started to come. Shout out to Mama Price, who is now one of the ancestors. So we started to have all these
Y'all,
voices.
Mama Price, though, y'all might remember Mama Price is who I told you. Remember I told y'all about the breaking bread and the Sunday dinners? That was because of
Mhm.
Mama Price. And she was participating in
Mama
these
Price.
Sankofa circles.
Elders in the Sankofa circles are critical. My good sister Lakeisha Wolf, that runs Sankofa in Pittsburgh, she introduced libations. I'd never been a part of a libation. A libation is a pouring of water to acknowledge the ancestors and bring them into space. And we just started to see relationships formed, and we the model kind of changed. Every week we would look at a different issue that might be impacting us on campus, or the Amadou Diallo murder. I think was something that was good that had happened during that time period. And we just started to see all these relationships start to form. One of the other things was the Black Caucus would always have this huge initial meeting at the beginning of the year. 40, 50 people would come. But once they elected the officers, the political action chair, the economic communications, there was never really room to get to know each other unless you were friends already. So you would see the numbers decrease. So we decided to use this Sankofa circle to attach it with Black Caucus. So this would be our community service to bring the community together. And it was really organic because we had no idea that it was going to develop into what it was. But to make a long story short, after that first year, we had decided a lot of Blacks were complaining because we didn't have Blacks elected in student government and we didn't have any student activities money. So I think after our sixth or seventh Sankofa, we decided we were going to create a campaign with just us 50 people in Sankofa to make sure that we got Black folks elected. We ended up getting all of all of the people who ran elected. So it was like this big victory, and we saw the power of a collective community. Now we had libations. We added some call and response at the end. White people would walk by the room and look in. What are those Black folks doing? And we held a hard line. This is only for Black folks. That summer, my boss, they were really excited that the Black community had kind of strengthened and come together. Gave me more resources to build Sankofa. Gave me a graduate assistant to do some of the other work that we had to do. And the next year, we ended up through Sankofa Circle. We started a Saturday school in the community, right? A lot of times people don't realize we have all of the resources we need. We're just not connected. We started a Saturday school in State College community, even though it was a middle upper class community for Black kids. Those Black kids were the ones getting in trouble, trying to emulate some of the gangs and different things they saw on TV. And then we started getting death threats. Our Black Caucus president, I know Lurie has talked a lot about what we went through at Penn State. We started getting death threats, which was something that had traditionally happened at Penn State. But unlike the past, now when the death threats came, we had a strong community that was coming together on a regular basis with students, with faculty, with staff, with community members. And we used those death threats to mobilize and to really build in the community.
I want to pause you right there because where the man is going to cut us off in just a minute. But I also want to talk about, because you highlighted a couple of things, that successes that came out of this effort.
Right.
This wasn't a group that came together because we wanted to have an electoral impact. It just so happens because we had already baked in a habit, a ritual of gathering on a regular basis to have difficult conversations through a therapeutic model. And we're going to talk a little bit about the model on the other side of the commercial break. But because we had committed to that, when there was an opportunity that we recognized to have an impact in the electoral space, we were able to jump on it. It wasn't that we were planning to do some of the Saturday school things, but because we had already had a system of gathering and a space that would challenge us to be our best selves, when an opportunity showed up, we were able to jump on it. And so this space allowed for the creation of holistic community, not from people who all saw things the same. Because even as Sankofa evolved, you might have some of the corner boys in the session sitting next to the CEOs from the Black community. community in the session. And we have had people who just got out of jail in the sessions sit next to people who were prosecutors in the session, because the idea is that all of us as Black people, regardless of our class, regardless of our gender, regardless of whether we're suburban, whether we're urban, regardless of all of those fake divisions that are designed to separate us, we all have a commonality, and we all have the capacity to tap into several things: ancestral connection, the recognition that we depend upon each other, but having a space to process that allowed for us to also seize power in a
Right.
variety of ways. And go ahead.
No, I just want to say, you talked about that ancestral power. One of the things that really took our Sankofa Circle to another level, as I mentioned before, was the libation, because the libation allowed us to have a spiritual moment that was non-denominational. Lurie and I met in church, and we
Non-religious.
were
Right.
kind of raised in the Christian church. I ran the men's ministry, but when I was while we were at Penn State, but I would always relate the scriptures and the conversations to our Black community, and even a lot of the elders in the church would say, "Well, you're putting Black culture ahead of Christ." So it wasn't really the healthiest space for me to develop my political cultural mind. But in Sankofa space, we would pour libation, and we had Muslims, we had Christians, we had Buddhists, we had all these different people. But the libation allowed us to have that spiritual moment, that spiritual connection that was not that was not religious. And we always would say in the libation, throughout the transatlantic slave trade, we were spread all over the diaspora, thousands of languages, different religions, and sometimes these things hinder us from being able to maximize our power. But one thing that's undeniable is that we're all standing on the shoulders of those who died, struggled, sacrificed so that we could be here. So when you invite the ancestors, libations are real. And when we were brought here in the transatlantic slave trade, they outlawed libations because they knew that connection to our ancestors would hinder us from being good slaves. So just having a space where we just allowed only us, brought the ancestors in, actually evoked a power that we had no idea. We had no idea what we
Yeah,
had created.
but